Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We're going to be talking about some reading strategies, and the title of our webinar is Turn Up the Volume, and we're going to be speaking about or looking at how to build knowledge through fluency and vocabulary. As you take a look at this next slide, and I know this is not news to anyone, but just about the importance of literacy. And really, when we think about literacy, it involves every one of our content areas, and it really is so foundational. But let me show you this next slide, because this is the thing I think really defines literacy. When you look at this next slide, you'll see that we've listed all of the components of a balanced literacy diet. So there's reading, there's writing, there's language, there's listening and speaking. And those are our standards with our next generation standards. But when you look at the individual standards, you can see that as you look at each one of them, that in reading we've got many more clusters, many more objectives, and although reading is an equal portion of each of the parts, it does have a lot more stuff, a lot more skills that have to be mastered in order to make literacy happen. But you'll also notice within the circle that each of the parts are dependent on each other, so they're very interconnected, and you really can't have one without having them all working in conjunction together. And I think this sort of sums up what we know, those of us who've taught reading before. This really sums it up that, we talk about teaching reading, but boy, there's a lot of things that go into that. It's not just about comprehension strategies. Before those even happen, our children have to learn fluency and expression. They have to know the structures of text. They have to have a concept of print and even know phonics and those letter-sound correlations, as well as the vocabulary and phonemic awareness. So it sounds like it's easy, but we all know who have done that before that there is a whole lot that goes into the teaching of reading. I think Donald Bayer said it best when he said that when teachers conduct word study with students, they really are addressing needs in all areas of literacy, because the development in one area relates to the development in other areas. And we saw that with the slide that we just had previously. They're all very connected. This is known as the synchrony of reading, writing, and spelling development. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to take a look at a beginning reader diet. And depending on what grade level you're in, typically you are going to see a beginning reader. Sometimes you will have them starting in kindergarten, but typically these are going to be your first grade to third grade students. And you'll notice on the slide, on the left side we have the instructional goal, which is fluency, word study, comprehension, and writing. And then all the way over on the right side, under time spent, there's not a specific number of minutes, but there's a percentage of time. And I know that different schools, different counties have their own specifications about how much time there has to be, or your school or county may not. That may be a decision that's been left up to you. And so I try to be really careful about not putting a certain number of minutes. But what I want you to know is if you are looking at your entire instruction for teaching of reading, then you want to make sure that your emphasis for these beginning readers is fluency. Fluency really is the goal, and that's the thing that will take your readers to the next level of being a transitional reader. So what is that exactly? Well, Fluency, as we all know, and if you ask your children, they'll say it's reading fast. They want to be able to read quickly. Doesn't matter if it makes sense. Doesn't matter if they're reading the right words. They just want to go faster and faster. But one of the things that we also need to help them understand is that fluency involves more than just that speed. They have to read the words correctly, and they need to have a development of prosody. And all prosody means is that it should sound just like they're having a conversation. Now that's a key emphasis to put on this, because for some of your children, you have some children that just naturally, because of their dialect, may speak more slowly. And so they're not ever going to read maybe at the same speed that another student will, but you know that it sounds very natural when they're reading. It really sounds the same way that they talk. And that's the only thing I encouraged my students to do, was you want it to sound just like they're having a conversation with someone, rather than it being choppy and broken up and having to sound out and figure out each word. Now, when we look at fluency, there are two types of instruction that help with fluency and support that. One is repeated readings of text that either that they may have been prepared to read and that they're able to read fluently, or following along in a text that's being read aloud by a fluent reader. And that can happen a lot of ways. In our standards that we talk about two different types of text. We talk about narrative text and we talk about informational text. So both of those are important to be using in our instruction, but the way that we teach fluency, or the way that we support fluency development, really is the same no matter what type of text. And that involves children being read to. So whether we're reading aloud to them, they're listening to a recorded reading, you're having guest readers in, they're partner reading. So our children being read to, being read with, and sometimes that's sitting side by side with a fluent reader. And I know with my own children personally, sometimes we would sit side by side, and I would let them, as I'm reading along, I would get to a part where I knew they would know the words, and I would let them take over. So it was, they were very supported in it, but they had a lot of opportunity to feel successful. Your children being able to listen to fluent readers, or to read alone, having time for independent reading. All of those different types of activities will support fluency. So when you read to students, like we mentioned, that can certainly be a read aloud. Reading with students can be the choral reading. It can also be singing, and I don't want, I don't want to minimize the value of singing with students. There's some new research out that talks about if students sing songs, it really can increase their fluency even more quickly than choral reading, because the beat of the music will help support them keeping their rhythm steady. There's one caveat to that. If you choose to use reading or singing of songs, if you choose to do that, your children have to read along with the words. And when I use this with my class, I would be very explicit about this. I would say, we're doing this activity to support your fluency, but it's not going to help if you don't follow along with the words with your eyes, because we're training ourselves, just like if we were training to run a marathon or run a race, we're training ourselves to read at an appropriate speed. So, I would be very explicit in sharing that with your students. Now, there are two types of choral reading. One is repeated readings. So we're using the exact same text, but we're just reading that several times over several days. This really works best with a shorter passage. You know, sometimes I would have like a summary if we were studying a social studies or a science concept, and we would just read that summary, you know, over and over or before we begin a lesson. Or poetry. This is a really good use of poetry or short prose text. Or another way to do choral reading is wide reading, where we're reading a similar but a different text each day. So they're getting the concepts, the same, you know, concepts, same topics, but the text is a little different. So when we listen to students read, again, two ways that we can do this are through that repeated reading or through guided reading. And I know that you all have been working a lot this year on developing those guided reading strategies and doing that instruction in small groups. And I just applaud that work that you're doing. Thank you for that. That is, you know, I remember when I first started doing that, that was really hard for me at first. It was hard to figure out classroom management strategies. It was hard for me to always know what to do with them or what was right. And, you know, the truth is, if this is new for you, you know, if this is your first year trying that, give yourself some grace. You know, we all start at some point, but we can all make progress. So, you know, wherever you are in this process, just know that you can, you know, if you keep working at it and you're just tenacious about practicing this and giving yourself a lot of opportunities to try it, it really does get easier. And it won't be long until you're able to just do that easily, and your children know exactly how to move from group to group. Guided reading, though, is just a really critical strategy to be able to use in your instruction, because your children are so scaffolded. They have so much support with you being there, with you setting the stage, with you just providing them, you know, support and clues as they are working their way through that text. And then students being able to read alone. Generally, this would be at their independent level, but I will tell you, you know, I would caution you, even though you know their independent reading level, I would caution you not to restrict them to that, because research shows that children will actually be able to comprehend text, you know, sometimes that are 2 or 3 years over what their independent level is, simply because they have high interest in a book or in a topic. So you might have some of your children that love motorcycles or horses or whatever it is, and you know, they just want to read every single book. Well, sometimes, I know in schools I've worked in before, you know, my children would go in the library and want to check out books that were, you know, over their independent reading level, and the librarian wouldn't want to let them do that, because she said, you know, they're not going to be able to comprehend it. And I really wanted to give them the opportunity for that. Now, did they get every single word? No. But a lot of times they had enough knowledge about a topic that they were able to comprehend at a much higher level than they would have been, you know, with something that I had chosen for them. So when we talk about students reading alone, they can do that paired reading or buddy reading, you know, just two of them that read at a similar level. And one other thing about students reading alone, and I've been in this role at the Department of Ed for a couple of years, and two of the things that I've heard teachers say, and you might feel this very same way, you might have felt this pressure about, I don't have time anymore, you know, there's a lot of paperwork, or there's a lot of things that are on my plate that I have to take care of. And I've heard several teachers say, you know, some things I've had to let go. And invariably I'll hear them say, I've had to let go read aloud and I've had to let go of that independent reading where children have an opportunity to either read, silently or with a buddy. And let me just say, as we go on and we talk about fluency and how we can support that, those two things are really what will increase fluency more than anything else. So if you're going to let something go, or you feel the need to cut back on time somewhere, that's not the place to do it. Those are really the things that you need to hang on to. Having your children be read to, that gives them the experience of hearing fluent readers and what that sounds like to change your voice and have intonation. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. I know that a lot of teachers have felt that pressure, and so I just want to hopefully take that off of you and give you a little more confidence about that. That is the right thing you're doing. And again, the paired reading is just when one reader is the tutor and the other one is the tutee. So all that means is that you have one that reads a little higher, has a little more expertise in reading, and they're able to support the other one. Now, I don't know how many times I heard this when I was teaching third grade. That's the time you really start to see some difficulties in children that may not have experienced them before. And I would have a lot of parents come in and say, but, my child was a good reader in second grade. I don't understand why they're having these problems. And I would just try to encourage them that, what you've got to understand is that text really increases in complexity. Whereas before, in those earlier grades, our whole day is around reading and supporting fluency and, really helping them with comprehension. And then we move into where they're having to actually get information from text. So a lot of times you will see some difficulty show up there that may not have shown up before. And that's okay. Just be able to articulate that to your parents. Now, I think this one's really good because a lot of times, I know we talk about fluency. I know that we do a lot of types of assessments, formative or summative, but sometimes fluency is not one of those things that we, just intuitively know that we need to have some way to know whether or not what we're doing is making a difference. And so you've got to have some way of knowing, are they becoming more fluent? There are a lot of things you can do with that. Now, I know myself, a lot of times I would use those graphs where my children would color in the number of words they could read in, a minute or however long. And that's one strategy, and, one that my children got excited about, for sure. But that was one of the things I found that really started pushing them towards just reading faster and faster and faster, rather than learning that prosody and just that normal sounding speaking voice that should be present when they're reading. So another way to do that is to record them. And what I would do is, I would let them listen to a recording of this passage that they were getting ready to read. Your Basel series may have recorded readings that you could certainly use for this purpose. So I would let them listen to somebody reading it with prosody. We would talk about, what kinds of things made you think they were good readers, what kinds of things let you know they were reading fluently. And then I would record them and just compare those. How was your reading different? How is it alike the fluent reader? And what kinds of things do you think you could work on to move to be an even more fluent reader? And again, this just goes back to those indicators of fluent reading, which are pace, accuracy, and prosody. Now, thinking back to the diet that we showed, this is the next part in the reading diet, which is word study. So fluency was going to be 40% of our time. All the other components are 20% each. Word study is just sorting known words by alliteration, their beginning sounds, their rhyme, which is their short vowel families, and short and long vowel sounds outside of rhyme. Some strategies that you might want to do as part of this would be picture sorts. Even when I taught upper grades, I always started with a picture sort when we started a new type of skill or a new type of sound that we were studying, because I wanted to know that they could hear the difference before they started looking at patterns in the spelling. So I always started them with a picture sort, and does this one sound more like this word or like this word, and have them sort them that way. And then of course word sorts, where we're actually looking at the way the words are composed. Buddy sorts are where they can work together. This is another good thing when you've got those small groups. This can be one of those learning stations where they can do their word study work while you're working with a guided reading group. Written sorts, where they're just practicing, those patterns that they see within the words. And then speed sorts. They love those speed sorts. I would put them in small groups of 3. Just have them, stoop down on the floor, sort their words as quickly as they could after getting them out of their baggie, and then jump up as soon as they were finished. And then we would check each other's and do a celebration. And then there's the comprehension piece, and this is the one that we really focus on a lot. But as you'll see as we go through this, it's not the focus right now until we have our students reading fluently. And I'll show you why in a minute. We're going to talk about that a bit more. And then once our children have gotten fluency, they have achieved their fluency in their reading, then you'll notice that they move to that next level of reader, a transitional or an instructional reader. And you can see that the time spent is different. So before we had the majority of our time spent on fluency. Now we're looking at the majority of our time spent on comprehension. So those strategies, just helping them, with their metacognition, which is just thinking about their thinking, how they're processing the information. So that becomes our focus now. Now I want you to take a look at this. Let's just think about this for a minute. The fluency and vocabulary connection, because I think this is going to be a real critical piece in your reading instruction. A student who does not achieve fluency will not grow vocabulary. They can either read, really simple texts that aren't going to change their vocabulary, because usually they're predictable texts, texts that really are more about the spelling of words than they are any type of meaty information. So they'll either read those really easy texts that they can read independently, and that's just not going to grow fluency. This is not the same as close reading. Some of you may be using that strategy of close reading, which is a great strategy, where you're taking your children back, when we're asking really good quality questions, and then we're having them go back. What made you think, this character felt this way? Or, where can you find about the development of a plant or an animal? So taking them back to that text and having them really rely on that. This is not the same as close reading, because close reading includes a lot of support, so it's not independent. Now, I'm going to give you a little quiz. No panic. Just let's take a look at this. I know that most of us are very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, and we hear all the time about how, oh, it needs to be high on Bloom's taxonomy. And so we're going to take a look at this one. This is a very, simple on Bloom's taxonomy, is just restating the following sentence in your own words. How are you going to restate this? Now, I don't know about you, but as I look at that, I don't know, I get very anxious. Like, what the heck? I don't even know what they're saying. I don't know how to restate that. And this actually is from the Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. It's actually from a philosophy class. And I don't know, I'm sorry to admit this, but I didn't do very well in that class, but we'll just move along. But you can see, even though that was really low on Bloom's taxonomy, this is challenging. So let's take a look at the next one. This is the second question that we're going to look at. This one's high on Bloom's taxonomy. What we're asking this time is to read the following passage. We want to write a letter to the editor defending the moral values of the main character that the main character displays with regard to animals. So this question really asks a lot of critical thinking. Students have to infer a character's beliefs from their speech. They have to synthesize those beliefs into an understanding of the character's moral framework. Then they have to use that understanding to argue for a point of view. So let's take a look at it. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. "Out to the hog house," replied Mrs. Arable. "Some pigs were born last night." "Well, I don't see why he needs an axe," continued Fern, who was only 8. "Well," said her mother, "one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it." "Do away with it?" shrieked Fern. "You mean kill it, just because it's smaller than the others?" This passage, of course, was taken from Chapter 1 of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. So now, out of those two, which question was easier? And why? Why do you think that was easier when we looked at that second question? And now, this is the place I really want to point out that reading's not about a generic set of skills or strategies. So had we taken a whole week on finding the main idea or making inferences, would that really have helped us with question 1? That section from the philosophy book? I know it wouldn't have me, because reading about philosophy requires knowledge about philosophy and the vocabulary of philosophy. It's not a practice making inferences. Reading about farm life, of course, requires a different and much simpler knowledge of words in the world. A reader doesn't struggle with the first question because of a lack of critical thinking skills. They struggle with the first question because they lack knowledge. Now take a look at this. Some of you, if you've ever been to any of my sessions, I use this in nearly every one because I just think it is just flabbergasting when we think about what this says, that research has shown that when it comes to risk factors for vocabulary development, poverty trumps everything. Trumps race, trumps our ELL students, and language impairments. So any types of interventions that we do to support that, they have to be powerful enough to accelerate, not just incrementally advance word learning for students coming from low-income households, to narrow that achievement gap. And this is why when those babies come to us, by the time they reach school age, children that come from homes of poverty, they've heard fewer words than higher income children. Look at this, 30 million fewer words. Now, we're not talking about them knowing 30 million fewer words. We're talking about them having actually heard through conversations, through interactions with others, with peers or adults. They have heard that many fewer words. And a lot of times, children that aren't in poverty have heard those words because someone's reading to them. Someone's helping them interact with their surroundings, with road signs or signs in the store, or picking out the cereal in the cereal aisle. So whatever the reason is, most of our children who come to us from low-income backgrounds have heard significantly fewer words than higher income children for a lot of reasons. Of course, if you're a parent who's struggling to make ends meet, maybe you're a single mom and you are working 2 jobs. When you get home, a lot of times, I know even myself, just when I would get home, it was like I'm just trying to feed everybody. I'm just trying to get them in the bathtub, just trying to get them in the bed. There's just a lot that happens in homes that a lot of times I don't think we are really cognizant of the lives that our babies lead outside of our classroom. And so I would just encourage you to think this through and how we can support them coming to us already with this significant deficit. Now here are our students. If you'll look at up in the left-hand corner, we had 267,000 students last year. Well, actually, sorry, this was the enrollment for 2013. And if you look in the big green circle, over half of our students are low SES. Over half of them come to us in poverty. When you look at the orange circle, you'll see those are students with disabilities. And of our students with disabilities, we're talking about 20% of our student population have some type of identified disability. And then right there in the middle, we've got a little over 10% struggle with both. Not only do they come from poverty, from low-income backgrounds, they also have some sort of identified disability. So as you can see, we have a lot of work ahead of us to support our children here in West Virginia. And take a look at this. This really, I think, is such a reality with a lot of our students. And sometimes, I even see it in our schools that we hurt for our families that are there, our children that come to school. But sometimes that causes us to, we do feel sorry for them. We do want to take care of them and nurture them. But sometimes that also leads us down a road where we get to the place where we say, well, what can you expect? Their families, maybe don't have the resources to support them. I've had other siblings, this is the way it's always been. So we really get to a place where the poverty becomes not about an economic deprivation, but it becomes about a mindset. And a lot of times it's our mindset that we just believe in meager possibilities. We do not see the chance and the opportunity for these children to rise above their circumstances. And I'll tell you, if there's anything I can encourage you to do, is you have to be the torchbearer for those babies. Because a lot of times you've got families who've been through the whole school situation. they weren't successful. Now they've got their own children coming through, coming through the schools. They don't see their children being successful, and it just is a cycle that just keeps being perpetuated. So if there's not someone who's going to take a stand, who's going to put a stake in the ground and say, there is a way out of this, and I'm going to show you what it is. Sit down here, let's get to work, because you know what, you can graduate from high school. Not only that, you can go to college, you can get a good job. There is a way out of this, and education is a really significant factor in that. So I just encourage you to be the torchbearer for the children that you serve in your classrooms, because it may be there is no one else in their family who is even able to think like that. So you have a huge responsibility, I know that, but boy, what amazing and gratifying and honorable work this is. So, and again, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the work you're doing. You know, we do owe our students a better experience for reading. We really have to help them get that vocabulary and knowledge of the world that they need in order to be able to read complex text. Now, if you teach in those early grades, pre-K up to second, you know that we don't have those lexile ranges. That starts in third grade. But so these are the grade bands that we're wanting to help our children, or lexile reading bands, I'm sorry, that we want to help our children be able to access, to know that they are reading proficiently at grade level. For those younger grades, you just want to read high quality text, whether it's narrative or informational text, that's given them a lot of opportunity to gain knowledge about different topics and experiences that they certainly may not have at home. Now here's the difference, and I think this is the key when we talk about guided reading. I'm an old reading first person. I lived in Virginia when reading first came, so I know I'm dating myself somewhat. And we talked a lot about that zone of proximal development, having our children at that instructional level. And I remember we were very definitive about determining what that zone was. What was the exact level where they needed to be reading to make the most progress. And let me just say up front, I do not have anything against that. I still support that. I do think that there is value in knowing what a child's instructional level is, using that in your guided reading groups. That's important, of course it is. What I think the difference, and what I believe that our next gen standards have really called on us to do, is using that zone of proximal development, or in our guided reading groups. Sometimes, we have a child in a certain reading level, however you're designating that. We have a child in a certain reading level, and we're in hopes that they're going to be able to access grade level text eventually. So, maybe by the end of the year, but, if they're in level D, that's a lot of levels they're going to have to go through if we're just moving through the levels incrementally. So sometimes this is a goal of helping them access that grade level reading eventually. What our next gen standards really require of our students and of us as educators is that we are giving them an opportunity to access that grade level text every single time. So let me give you an example. For instance, we are studying about the life cycles in science, and we certainly may have some different leveled readers to help support our students. Maybe we're doing in our guided reading groups, we're using some text about our science topic. But we're also taking into account that if I'm doing a read aloud, or if they're doing a buddy reading, or if this is a topic that's of high interest to them, I can give them access to grade level text every time we're covering a different topic. So I don't have to keep them, pigeonholed into a certain level of reading. I can do that in my guided reading groups, but at the same time, I'm always calling them back to, here's where we're headed. Here's the appropriate grade level text. And, just try it. I want you to have an opportunity to interact with text at your grade level. And really, how does that happen? Well, it happens through a volume of reading, having good vocabulary instruction, and of course, scaffolding. Just giving them a lot of support, but letting them know at the same time, you know what, you can do this. I'm not going to let you fail. I'm convinced that you are able to do this, and I'm going to help you be successful. And one of the things, again, going back to my, when I was in the classroom, we call these text sets. A lot of people now call these expert packs, but nevertheless, what research is showing is that if we read a volume of reading, a group of texts around a topic, that will increase our students' vocabulary and knowledge. Now, this is a little different because I know a lot of times in a basal series, they will have themes, my community, or animals, or whatever it is. They'll have some sort of theme like that. But let's say we're talking about a theme of friendship. Well, I might have a story of Toad and Frog. I might have one of Charlotte's Web. I have to make that connection for children to know that we're talking about friendship. That's not something that they're probably just going to intuitively know. So I have to help them make that connection about the theme. However, if we're studying horses, or if we're studying a particular science topic, when we study a volume of text around a topic, then they are getting multiple exposures to that topic with similar vocabulary, but it's building their knowledge, and it's giving them access to multiple texts with the support of knowing that they're all on, every book that we're looking at is about horses. So as I'm reading about horses, I'm not only learning about horses, I'm learning about horses out west. I'm learning about the wild horses of Chincoteague. I'm learning about horses on the farm. I'm learning about race horses. So I'm getting a lot of knowledge, again, in the context of that text set or that expert pack. Now, I know when I used to develop text sets, it was a lot of work, and a lot of times I would just go into my librarian or go to my county library, and I would just pull bunches of books, around whatever topic that we were studying. The thing that I didn't do well about was being intentional about putting those in some sort of order, so it helped my children move from maybe the least demanding up to the more demanding text, or the text at their appropriate grade level. I didn't do well about that. I didn't really have a lot of knowledge on how to do this. So I do know that can require a lot of work, but let me show you this. If any of you have ever been to Achieve the Core, if you haven't, oh my goodness, you do need to go. There are so many resources on there that can really support you. A lot of work's been done for you. But one of the pages on Achieve the Core is this text set project, and we had some of our very own West Virginia teachers participate in this and submit text sets to this project. But as you'll see, gives you some information about building text sets. But then look at this. Look at this. They are already created for you. So you don't even have to pick that. So when you go to the resource, let's say about insects, pull this up here so you can see it. When we're taking a look at this particular expert pack that was created, it will have all of our texts and resources for us. And when the teams were charged with creating these, they were very careful about making it minimal expense. So we tried to find things that were online, infographics, different types of things that didn't involve a cost, or else books that we knew were pretty readily available. But all your resources are there, the rationale for the way that they've been sequenced, the shifts and the standards that are involved, and then there's an annotated bibliography and suggested sequence for the reading. You'll see there's the text complexity guide, supports for your struggling students, and your actual lesson plans to go along with each one of these, with activities that support the building of vocabulary and knowledge. A lot of resources that are here already developed for you, and I was always of the mindset, if it is there, I really have better things to do with my time than trying to recreate actual lessons that are already available for me. So I would encourage you to go there, right to Achieve the Core. When you get there, you can just search for the text set project, or you can use the link in this webinar in the PowerPoint. I'll be happy to send that to you as well. And then also, as well as the text set project, there are also resources available in the digital library through Smarter Balance. Again, if you're not familiar with that, if you go to the West Virginia Department of Ed homepage, in the search bar, if you just type in Office of Assessment, it will take you right to this page. And here's the link for the digital library. When you open that, right here at the top is the link that will take you there. And you will use your login. And I think for me, it was my same login that I use on my computer. If you're not sure about it, you can use the forgot password, and it will help you get signed on. When you log in, it's really simple to look for resources. You can go to subject. I only want to look at ELA and grade 2 and find resources. And I'm showing you this because when I shared a specific resource that was on here with another group, they said, I've heard about the resource library all this time. I had no idea that it was for younger students. I thought it was only for students that were ready to take that general summative assessment. And that's not at all true. There's some really, really great resources on here available for you to use. Some other considerations as you think about supporting your readers, one would be teaching them how to access the text. Now, sometimes we know that if we are looking at a magazine or we are looking at that philosophy book that we talked about before, or we're reading a poem, that we have to do different things to be able to understand and access that text. For children, a lot of times that's not intuitive. They don't just automatically think that. And so they'll go to informational text using the skills that they know about how to access a narrative text. And it doesn't always work for them. So just giving them a roadmap, letting them know, you know what, if you're reading informational text, it looks differently. Let's look in here about how the authors of this book are trying to support you with captions or with headings or this glossary that's in the back or diagrams or you know, looking at the summaries at the end of the chapter that give you just kind of a bite-sized look at what all the information is in the rest of the chapter. Now this is a recorded webinar, and so I know you don't have an opportunity to ask questions because it's recorded. However, I'm always available to help. I'm going to put up my email address, my office number, as well as my cell number, and I give that cell number out freely because if I'm not in the office and you need me, you feel free to call me on my cell phone. I do not mind that at all. If I'm not able to answer it right when you call, leave me a message because I'm very prompt about getting back with you to support your work. I'm just so thrilled and honored to be a part of what you're doing with our children in the state, and I want to help you any way that I can. So just know that I'm here to serve you with any resources or ideas, or you know, if you just want to bounce some ideas off me or collaborate together on something, I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if there's anything that I can do to help you, just let me know and I'll be glad to do it. You all have a great day.